What's going on, guys? Tyson the Trainer here, back with another episode of Sports Talk. So we're going to be continuing on from what we've been talking about so far. We've talked about energy balance, we've talked about energy availability, we've talked about how to find out your ideal calories based on your goals and just based on your energy expenditure. And today we're going to be covering macronutrient profiles, right? So when it comes to macronutrients, it's going to be quite individual for each person, so I can't really give a broad statement here. But we can give some generalities, is that the word I'm trying to think of, to kind of get you started on the right path, right? So ideally, when it comes to macronutrients, we have 4 different macronutrients. We have protein, carbs, fats, and alcohol. Alcohol is still classed as a macronutrient. We're not really going to take into account for this consideration, but it does contain 7 calories per gram. So just to remember that if you are going to drink 7 calories per gram of alcohol. However, the 3 we're going to focus on today, protein, fats, carbohydrates, and fiber, despite fiber not being a macronutrient, it's just a part of the, it's basically a part of carbohydrates. It's its own macronutrient that does actually have calories, but we don't track it itself, especially in Australia. It's just a part of the carbohydrate content. So with these 3 different macronutrients, protein, fats, carbohydrates, protein contains 4 calories per gram, right? Carbs contain 4 calories per gram. Fats contain 9 calories per gram. So fats are calorie dense compared to protein and carbs. They're actually more than double, the amount per gram. And that's why when we have higher fat foods, we actually reduce our portion sizes because fats contain such a large amount of calories, right? Now, with this being said, to focus on what our macronutrient goals are going to be, I always like to look at protein first. Now, everyone's going to roughly get the same amount of protein recommendations. If you are someone who's doing a sport that's more endurance-based, so if you're doing long-term cycling or marathon running, things like that, ultra-endurance, then you're going to want to really increase your protein intake. Now, the reason we're going to need more protein intake if you're someone who's more of an endurance or long-distance athlete is because you are contracting and breaking down muscles so much and also upregulating certain enzymes that are catabolic, and you need to be able to repair that muscle mass, So this is the most important thing for you. You would actually want to go on the higher end of the protein range, whereas everyone else who's just, someone who's lifting and doing some sports a few times a week, or if you're someone who is doing sports, but it's not as, how am I trying to think of here? It's not as demanding on your body. So, playing rugby league, doing track and field sports, sprints, swimming, things like that, they are demanding on your body, but nothing when it comes to hours of muscle contraction at a time. So you've got to think, like, where's this going to come onto the scale for you? For me, boxing, weight training, and doing the assault bike, I'm going to sit, basically on that safe end. For everyone else, for other people who are, again, doing the longer term, like if it's over 90 to 120 minutes of continuous exercise, the really long distance stuff, then that's going to be an important thing for you to be able to focus on is protein, okay? So for most people, sitting between 2 to 2.5 grams per kilogram of body weight is going to be ideal, all right? That 2.5 grams is going to be more towards the endurance side of things. The 2 to 2.2 grams is going to be for people like me. If you're lifting weights and you're doing some exercise outside of weights like cardiovascular stuff, sometimes it could be for an hour to 90 minutes, making sure that you are getting that 2 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. All right. Some people use a fat-free mass, so same things I talked about energy availability. It could be a certain amount of protein per kilogram of fat-free mass if you want to be pedantic about it. However, I always think it's safer to have a little bit more, and we go off total body weight. So having a few extra grams of protein could be more beneficial than detrimental. So 2 grams per kilogram to start off with. If you're someone who's doing more than weights, getting around that 2.2 grams. If you're someone who's doing long distance, 2.5 grams. Best sources to get your protein from would be animal products for the most part. So when I say animal products, we've got beef, chicken, poultry, beef, chicken, turkey, pork. What am I thinking of? Goat, kangaroo, fish, eggs, dairy. So we've got your protein powders, your Greek yogurts and stuff like that. Most animal products are going to contain the best sources of protein for you. Okay, they're complete amino acid profiles, which means they contain all amino acids, and that also just means that, at the end of the day, having animal products, if you can have them, is going to be a great choice for you to get all your protein in. If you're someone who's vegan or vegetarian and you need to get your protein, then you're going to be using a lot of tofu, a lot of tempeh, and a lot of vegan protein powders, and also seitan. Now the issue with the vegan side of things is performance can definitely be an issue for you. So you need to make sure you are very much dotting your T's and crossing your I's, obsessing more about that tofu, tempeh, getting the actual full complete amino acid profiles in your protein intake, and then just also making sure that you're nailing your protein daily consistently to do everything you can. Sometimes when we have animal products and we have more of a range in our protein choices, we may not get to that 2.5 grams or that 2.2. We may even go a little bit under, and it's going to be actually okay compared to someone who's vegan or vegetarian. They really have to put in the effort, So if you are an athlete who's vegan or vegetarian, making sure you're very, I would say pedantic and quite obsessive about making sure you're getting enough quality protein in for the day. Hopefully that makes sense. So we got our protein. Next comes our fats, all right, our minimum fat intake. So like I've just said, 2 to 2 grams per kilogram of body mass, or 2.5 if you're an endurance runner. Write this down or have it somewhere so you actually know. This way you can go off your calories that you've talked about the other day. So if you've been trying to figure out your NEAT and your exercise activity thermogenesis, this is how we're going to start plugging those things in. So if you have your overall calories and you need 2 to 2 grams per kilogram of body weight, that means, again, so the other day I said I was a 100 kilo male and I was burning 4,100 calories a day. If I was burning 4,100 calories a day and I needed 2.2 grams, that's 220 grams of protein. 220 times 4 is 880 calories, right? So out of that 4,100, 880 calories are going to come from my protein. So then next comes to our fats. Fats are going to be, we want to have a minimum amount of fat intake for the day. Fats are quite important. They're going to be for nutrient transport, for hormone health, just for bodily functions, and it makes food taste good. So when it comes to having fat, we want to make sure we get a minimum of 0.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. Okay? Now, when I say minimum, that's all I mean, is the least amount we want to have for the day. So if I was a 100 kilo male, 60 grams minimum is what I want to be having. If you are someone who, again, is quite, you focus more on your sport, you probably want to keep it more towards that minimum side of things for the most part, because carbohydrates are going to be your main fuel source for your races, for your sporting bouts, for whatever it's going to be. Carbohydrates are going to be the driver of this, okay? So this is why we want to make sure we're going to use our minimum fat intake and then try and use the rest of our calories predominantly from carbohydrates, but there's a little bit of intricacy which I will talk about. So with the 0.6 grams per kilogram of body weight, we want to make sure a majority of those fats are coming from polyunsaturated fats and monounsaturated fats, okay? So the best way to do this for your polyunsaturated fats, fish oil or fatty cuts of fish. You can also get a little bit of polyunsaturated fats from your free-range eggs, but mostly it's going to come from fatty fish, so trout, salmon, herring, things like that, or getting fish oil tablets. If you are going to take fish oil, a generic fish oil tablet is going to be fine. I would recommend about 3,000 to 5,000 milligrams in total a day, and that'll help you get the combination of 1,000 milligrams of EPA and DHA all together. I think that's right, EPA, DHA. I feel like I'm having a mind blank. But yeah, so 3,000 to 5,000 milligram tablets a day are going to be fine for that. That's going to be your polyunsaturated fats. Then your monounsaturated fats. So eggs, avocado, nuts, seeds, olive oils, vegetable oils, things like that. They're going to be your poly and monounsaturated fats for the most part. What we want to be avoiding, even though it's not detrimental, is saturated fat. And trans fats mostly. You're not really going to get any trans fats because at the end of the day, trans fats are kind of being weaned out of food, which is good. But our saturated fat, it's not too bad if we have it in small amounts. We want to avoid it as much as possible and focus on our mono and polyunsaturated fats. Now, when we get saturated fats, usually it's going to come from things like butter, animal products, so full fat dairy, full cream things, deep fried stuff, all your baked goods. Most of that stuff's going to be saturated fats. And again, we just want to keep that to a minimal. So what I would say is try and choose leaner cuts of meat, try and choose low fat dairy, try and choose, not avoid fat completely, but try and choose those fattier cuts of things, and then focus on getting your healthy fats from the avocados, the nuts, the seeds, the oils, and stuff like that's going to be your best choice, right? So 0.6 grams per kilogram body weight. In this case, again, 100 kilo male, 0.6 grams, 60 grams of fat. Fat contains 9 calories per gram. 6 times 9 is 540 calories from fat, okay? So we've got 880 calories from protein. We've got 540 grams of fat. If I add those two together, it's 14, 15, 20, I think, off the top of my head. 1,520 calories. That means for the remaining, so if I go 4,100, take 1,520 calories, I've got 2,490, I think, off the top of my head. And then you divide that by 4 to get your carbohydrates left over. So this person is going to have a lot of carbohydrates left over. 2,000 calories worth of carbohydrates. I can't do that math off the top of my head. I think I'm going to say like 400 to 500 grams of carbohydrates left over. That's pretty solid, right? The reason we want to make sure the rest of our calories are coming from carbohydrates, like I said again, it's going to be our fuel source. It's going to be helping with our intensity. It's going to be helping with our intensity. It's going to be helping us push PB. It's going to be helping us recover. It's going to be helping us spike our insulin so we can actually make sure we're getting nutrients into the muscle. Carbohydrates are very anabolic, very performance enhancing, and we want to make sure we're doing all we can to get the most amount of carbohydrates in. Okay, so once you've done all this for yourself, making sure that you calculate your protein, you calculate your minimum fats, you figured out how many carbohydrates are left for you. This should be on the days that you're contracting muscle and doing a lot of exercise. Okay, we want to really ramp up those high carbohydrates as much as we can for performance. However, in saying that, the days where you're not burning as many calories or you're not as active, swapping. This is where, like for a lot of people I talk about, if you're general population, you don't need to worry about alternating calories, alternating macronutrients and things like that. However, if you are someone who is an athlete, then this is really important for you to be able to do because you want to teach our body to be metabolically flexible, use carbohydrates as a fuel source, but then use fat as a fuel source too. So what I'm saying here is on the days you're not as active, you're not burning as many calories or your runs and things aren't as long, reduce your carbohydrate intake and increase your fat intake on that day. By how much? It's not too much of an issue. I would just say, try to get to that 1 to 1.2 grams per kilogram body weight for fats and then use the rest for carbohydrates. So maybe, between 0.6 on one day to 1 to 1.2 grams on another day. And it's just going to vice versa with the carbohydrates and fats. And this way it's going to help teach your body to be metabolically flexible. And then also it just gives you a chance of variety in your food too. Because, you want to change it up sometimes and you don't want to just have always just high carbohydrates because sometimes it's hard to eat all those calories, especially when you're exercising. Sometimes your appetite can actually downregulate after exercise. And you're like, fuck, I need to get all these carbohydrates in. And it can be quite taxing for you to do it. So making sure when you do have the time or on those days where you're not exercising as much, swapping it around, right? Now I'm touching on this now and I'm going to touch on fiber. But one thing to consider also is training in a low glycogen state, right? So sometimes we have this method of called train low. So basically when we're going to train low, what we're trying to do is have a lower carbohydrate dinner, nothing to eat in the morning, train on an empty stomach. This way we're going to teach our body to change fuel sources again. Since we're going to be in a low carbohydrate state, we're going to use fat as a fuel source and we're actually going to upregulate certain enzymes. So training low also has its place, not really in this talk, but just wanted to let you know. So sometimes we will be manipulating these macronutrients a little bit, but over here I'm just trying to give you the broad overview. So we've covered protein, we've covered fats, we've covered carbohydrates and fiber. All right, fiber is quite important. Fiber is quite important from bowel movement for overall just healthy, getting things moving and just it's good for your gut health. So when it comes to fiber, we want to make sure for the amount of calories you're having 12 to 15 grams per 1,000 calories. All right. So if I'm 4,000 calories at the moment, I'm having between what's 12 times 4? 48 to 60 grams of fiber a day. Now, with that being said, that's a little bit too much in my opinion. We have 12 to 15 grams per 1,000 calories up to about the 3,000 calorie mark because some people, they get GI issues, okay? And we don't want to have GI issues, especially being an athlete. The last thing you want is having any stomach issues. So some tips for this, try and slowly increase your fiber intake till you find a good point where you have regular bowel movements, but it's not causing you any issues or bloatedness or going to the bathroom too quickly or anything like that. And that's going to be your sweet spot, okay? If we have too little fiber, we'll be constipated. If we have too much, we're going to go to the bathroom too frequently and have issues with our stomach. So we want to find that sweet spot. Once you find that sweet spot, we want to separate the fiber away from our workout, okay? So try not to consume any fiber an hour before or an hour after your workout and try and keep it for your other meals. If you plan on working out at 12 p.m. and you're going to have a meal at 9 a.m., then yes, you want to make sure you're having fiber in that so it slows down the digestion of the food. But again, if you're someone who's going to, eat an hour before you work out, have something quick, have a piece of fruit or make sure you have, some raisin toast or something like that. Something that's quick acting carbohydrates, but at the same time, it's not going to cause any bloatedness or breaking down issues because it's at the full amount of fiber. And this way, you're going to kind of have the best of both worlds. You're still going to get your fiber intake, but you're still going to be focusing on performance too without having any of those stomach issues. So that's the video for today, guys. Quite simple, quite easy. I mean, that's not much else to say on that topic. So 2 to 2.5 grams per kilogram body weight for protein, 0.6 grams of fats per kilogram body weight minimum. The rest for carbohydrates. Make sure you alternate on those days you're not contracting muscle versus contracting muscle, or doing long periods of exercise versus not long periods of exercise. Always keep your protein the same. We don't change the protein. We always keep it the same. And finally, making sure you're getting 12 to 15 grams per 1,000 calories of fiber until you find your sweet spot. So guys, I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, as always, comment down below, ask me a message on Instagram, and I'll speak to you next time.